Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Thursday, the 22nd of September. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined this morning by Joshua Barrie. How are we getting on, Joshua?
Good. Thoroughly enjoyed after we played down how the entertainment would be at Hampden, Derek. I thought Scotland were, for that second half, they were brilliant, weren't they? And as Fraser says, maybe we should sign Lyndon Dykes for a physical presence at corner. Yeah, that was amazing the way that those two corners went in quick succession, wasn't it?
Listen, I need to hold my hands up. I watched no
Missed a good one. You missed a good one.
Listen, Nations League at the Scotland in the Nations League against Ukraine for the 89th time. It feels like not something that I filled my Wednesday evening with, I've got to admit. But yeah, good result for Scotland. Although I noticed that Nathan Patterson was stretched off. Let's hope he's okay, because he's a right poor time with injuries lately and just hitting a bit of form for Everton. So hopefully he is okay, young Nathan. But people are tuning in to talk Rangers, Joshua, not Scotland, albeit it was a good result for the country last night. Before we talk all things Rangers, of course, as you can see the little ticker below, folks, we've got that great offer on the website. So many of you taking advantage of it. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe for all the details. As ever, I'll stick the link in the comment section. So if you click on that, it'll take you to the website. Just put your details in. That's you signed up. You can take advantage of all the great stuff on there. Just £1 for 2 months worth of content. Just £2.99 per month thereafter. It's an absolute bargain. So go and check it out. And one of the great articles on there this morning, Joshua, focuses on a piece that you were getting stuck into yesterday with regards to whether Alfredo Morelos and Antonio Colak could and should play together. Now, it's one of those ones that supporters are asking now. Surely Rangers can accommodate the both of them based on the fact that they're misfiring currently. But what did you find?
Yeah, well, I've stuck it in the description, so if you want to go and read it, you can read it for £1. This is the type of stuff we do every day, lots of detail in it, and just £2 a month or whatever it is, £1 for 2 months. You're not going to get cheaper than that, so please do go and check it out. It's a topic, Derek, that I was kind of reluctant to think about in the first instance, because you know me, I don't like a 4-4-2, I know. But you kind of think, Van Bronckhorst was asked about it, and we start the piece this way. He was asked about it by a friend of the show, Martin Ramsey, about over a month ago. Could they play together? And he was visibly shocked. And the clip's in the piece, and you'll see what I mean if you've watched that press conference. Not shocked at the question as if it was a bad thing to ask, because it wasn't. It was a good thing to ask. But almost as if the thought hadn't even entered his head, as if it wasn't on his radar. And I think that ties into Van Bronckhorst's philosophy. We know that, as we've spoke about quite a few times in the last few days, he's not a manager that is married to a set formation, in my opinion. He's not Conte, who everyone has to fit into a set structure. He's got adaptability within his philosophy, but I also think he has certainties within his philosophy, and one of which is playing that big physical striker, which we've seen at Feyenoord. We heard him talk about in the summer. We've seen how he tried to use Aribo in that position when everyone was injured last year, and we see it with the type of profile he's brought in Antonio Colak. But Rangers, the team at the weekend, that doesn't have enough goals in it. It doesn't have enough dynamism in it. It's different discussion if Lawrence and Tillman are in there, absolutely. But if you look at the chances that Rangers have created, and again, we've spoke about that, loads of detail on that on the website. So if you want to go and read that, you can do so. They've just not created enough. I don't think they have enough goal threat, and that right-sided forward position is a bit of a problem. Now, I don't think that's where you play Morelos, but is there a way to cater them both? I guess that's the point of the discussion. So the first thing we look at is their statistical comparison. Got a nice radar in there that gives you quite a visual aid, and it shows, I think, Morelos. I'll read some stats to you just now, Derek. Morelos plays... I've taken Morelos' numbers from last season in the league, obviously, because he's only played about 2 seconds in this season. If you look at open play passes, for example, how many passes is Morelos playing compared to Colak? He's played 31.9 to Colak's 12, so 3 times more. But then if you look at something like shot touch, so the percentage of shots a player takes as a proportion of their touch, Colak's double that of Morelos. if you look at the post-shot XG, and this is all explained, so don't worry if this is a bit alien to you, the quality of finish, Colak's is almost double Morelos. And the big thing as well, that open play pass is how he's assisting teammates, creating for teammates. The underlying creative numbers, Morelos is far out in front of Colak as well. So obviously there is differences. They're similar players, but they've got differences within them. So then I guess the discussion becomes, well, can they play together? Are they too similar? Are they going to play in one another's zones? Would Morelos, who was revitalised, let's not forget, under Van Bronckhorst, and prior to that, everyone was saying it's an issue that he plays too deep. Would this, put him back in that position? Or have you got to consider the fact that I think Morelos' average league goals is something like 13 over the 5 seasons? He's not going to score at the rate that Colak scored. I think 5 seasons is a pretty good sample size to determine that, or I'd be surprised if he went and did that, although the rate he was scoring at when Van Bronckhorst first came in maybe corroborated to that. So there's differences. One likes coming short, one likes to stay up top. I think the main topic of discussion is when you are playing these home games, when you have so much possession, you need to increase the goal threat. Is it something that maybe should be explored?
Yeah, absolutely. So many comments coming in, folks. I'll try and get to as many of them as possible. William Niven gets in touch. He also missed the Scotland game last night. Submarine racing and was on ESPN. I don't know if that's a joke, but if it's not, I think I would like to tune into that. That's quite intriguing, though. Submarine racing. I wouldn't mind having a little gander at that. But lots of comments coming in with regards to the possibility if Morelos and Colak can play together. Before that, Steely FM touches on the deal we mentioned. He says he'll be renewing minds in November. Here's hoping for another Black Friday deal again. Listen, I'm sure there will be nearer the time, Steely FM, but thanks very much for your support anyway for the work that we do. James Strachan says, what about a 3-5-2? Stephen Gillespie says Morelos at 10 or on the right. He says that's RFC 56 has got counters that by saying, why are so many people saying Morelos is a number 10? Okay, for a few games in the SPL maybe, but come on. Morelos is a 10, Joshua. We've not really seen it enough, have we, really, to make a judgment on that? But over on that right-hand side, that seems to be where a lot of people are saying, why don't you try him out there, given the fact that Rangers don't really have someone with a nailed-on starting position out there?
Yeah, this is very friend of the show, Adam Thornton. It's his territory, Morelos on the right.
Yeah.
I am not in that camp. You can kind of tell this throughout the piece, I think, is that it's an exploration. It's not saying should it happen, it's saying could it happen, and here's maybe the reasons why it could work, and here's maybe the reasons why it could not work. But you're right, because you look at that starting 11 just now and you think how many players are droppable, and quite a lot of players are droppable. Yeah. It's not an ideal situation, but what's Rangers' strongest domestic team? Let's count back for a side because Davies hasn't come in yet, and we don't really know about that. The midfield, Lundstrom in there. I think at home it's got to be Lundstrom, Tillman, and Lawrence going forward. Personally, I just think that there's not a goal threat from out wide really whatsoever. I think Kent scored, what was it, 1 goal since? I think his last goal was maybe, I could be wrong, but I think it was against St Johnstone in the 2-0 win in December.
Wow.
Might be one since then.
In the league, maybe.
Maybe in the league, yeah.
He scored in Belgrade.
He scored against Red Star away from home.
Yeah.
So we know by now that it is not a guarantee that he's going to score goals. From the right hand side, you have the same until if and when Ravi Matondo comes in, you have the same persisting issue of Scott Wright can do some things well, but probably isn't, or I don't think is the answer there every single game. Scott Arfield continues to play in that role after a number of years, and you know what you'll get from him, but he's not getting younger. So then maybe you do consider at home, is it worth having a change of shape? And I don't think that needs to be a drastic. What's the difference between playing a 4-3-3 and a 3-5-2? Some ways, if it points anyway, Barisic is tucking in and then joining the attack, and Tavernier's going high. I was watching back the other day, Derek. This is a bit of a left field theory, but what I think is, because I was thinking, what is the best performance under Van Bronckhorst domestically against a team where it's just about breaking them down and you're trying to create, and it's exciting. And I think one of the best halves, that period just before the winter break, St Mirren, the game that was behind closed doors, was an example of when there was lots of fluidity, lots of rotation. Tavernier was inside, but he had those two high and wide wingers. And I just think, in my opinion, that lack of a player on the right to provide balance, if again, Matondo could come and do that, but he's not so far. I think this team really needs that, and I think that allows Tavernier to not always be restricted to being so far out wide. It just improves the balance of the team. It makes him a little bit less predictable. So it's not an ideal situation, I think, to have to be talking about how do you get more goals into the team, because that should have been alleviated, and probably it has been by Tillman and Lawrence. But yeah, maybe a 3-5-2 going forward with Tavernier wide and Barisic wide is an answer. But then again, before Van Bronckhorst came in, when Rangers had their fullbacks high and wide as the width all the time, it became predictable, a little bit predictable there as well. And teams were quite happy defending crosses. So will it work? I doubt it'll be trialled, as I say, because of Van Bronckhorst's comments in the press conference that day. But certainly what I think the piece does show is that they're not the same type of player. They're not just two number 9s who occupy the same zone. Even with Roof and Morelos, I think they both naturally want to come towards the ball. And it did work at points for me, their partnership in certain games, because the issue isn't when you're attacking the penalty box, it's not an issue of, you're going to have too many players in the penalty box. The more the better. You obviously want to try and reach the numbers the opposition have as much as possible. I think it's outside of the area. And as I say, everyone knows when Morelos is dropping deep, he can help Rangers link play. But then again, to counter it, would that just restrict him to having the performances he did before Van Bronckhorst came in, which, let's not be revisionist. They weren't good. He was out of form, and it was quite a drastic upturn when Van Bronckhorst initially came back to the club.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian McPhee says, how many goals per season does our midfield contribute? There is your answer. Not enough, I'd imagine. Certainly not enough last season. You're asking these players to certainly step up more often than they are just at the moment. Teddy Bear with an interesting point here. Why not play Bona Barisic on the left wing? Because he can't defend anyway, and play Yilmaz left back and drop Kent. Now, I've been a big advocate of playing Yilmaz at left wing. But how about this one, though, Joshua? Sticking Barisic up there, just supplying deliveries into the box. It's not going to happen, I don't think. But would you like to maybe see it, perhaps?
No. To counter it, where's Barisic's assists come from? The two that come to mind, let's look at the Lawrence one against Hibs, the Lawrence goal against Hibs, and at the weekend. It all comes from him being able to arrive in the box and go into space. If he's just there, we know Barisic he's not a great 1v1 player, not the best at creating space. But you look at when he does those overlaps, that's been one of Rangers' most potent attacking weapons, because they've not had that consistent creative outlet in the middle of the pitch. Him getting round Kent and being able to cross, he's done it in Europe as well. But yeah, if you look at that Hibs goal, if you look at the weekend, it's all about him being able to arrive for me in the final third, as opposed to just occupying it and then kind of not knowing what to do because he's not very good at 1v1. So I think there is a bit of an argument to drop Kent. I also think that if you take Kent out of there, although he's not playing well, he is still, I think he's got 3 assists, which isn't huge. His expected assist numbers aren't huge either, but are you going to play a player that can replicate that? I guess Rabbi Matondo would be the alternative, but then Matondo didn't even make the squad against Dundee United. So how realistic is that happening? Yeah. Is that going to happen after the international break? But Barisic, again, I've got a piece coming on Colak as well, and it's looking at how it's really interesting for me how Rangers have played to his strengths. You see the from the right, it's often cutbacks that are played into him, which I think accommodates that across the body swivel into the bottom corner, against Ross County and PSV that we obviously seen for Malmo at Ibrox last season. From the left, there's the front post delivery that we see at the weekend with the header against Dundee United, and I think it accommodates, it plays to his best attributes on either side, and Barisic's deliveries have been a real positive there, and I actually think he's been one of Rangers' better performers of a bad bunch, admittedly. And that's the difficult thing. You have Davies there, you have Yilmaz there, you have Matondo there, and you're looking at the positions, probably their preferred positions: left centre back for Davies, left back for Ridvan, and Matondo is he a right winger or a left winger? We don't know. And then you look at the positions maybe that need a new player at the moment, and it's the right wing, it's the centre midfield. So, it's not ideal at the moment. Obviously, we've discussed a lot about how these players will need time to come in and prove himself. And you just hope that this two-week international break gives them the kind of break to get going and get a role in the team and contribute going forward, because it is only 2 points for all. I think that the trends and the performances haven't been great. If a team can then go on and play well, and while they're still within touch and distance, that's not a bad position to be in, is it, Derek?
Absolutely not. And touching on Matondo, if you've seen his YouTube montage last season for Cercle Bruges, he plays predominantly on that left-hand side. I would like to see him tried out there, I've got to admit. Give him an opportunity to show what he can do. But again, the coaching staff see him in training every day, so there must be a reason why he's not been given an opportunity out there. Nikki Kearney gets in touch. Why do people suggest fullbacks in winger positions? Laughing emoji. So she is dead against that idea. Stephen Gillespie says, and it's a good point to touch on, Lowry is the replacement for Kent when he's back. And of course, he posted an image on his Instagram page yesterday. Boots back on, which is a good sign, Joshua, that he's recovering from his horrific injury sustained by the challenge from Ali Love against Dumbarton. Let's hope he's back soon, because he's another one that everyone was excited at seeing pre-season. He had that niggling injury, came back with the B team, and then he had that setback. He's one player I think that the Rangers fans will be really excited at seeing back in the first team again.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, I think the last time you spoke to David McCallum, the B team manager, he said he was progressing well, and
he's not. Yeah. He doesn't know when he's going to be back, but he's progressing well.
Yeah. So, I mean, Lowry played a little bit off the left last season. It's crying out for a player like him in this team. And it's funny how football can change, because you remember when Lowry initially came back, I think he went back into the B team to build up his fitness after, did he not pick up a small injury in pre-season or something?
Yeah.
And I remember he scored, I think it was away at Cowdenbeath, and it was just after Tillman had scored that header against Union, and everyone was very excited about him. And you look at it then when everyone's playing well, and you think, where does he get in? Where does his minutes come from? And then contrastingly, you look at it just now in a situation, and it's a reminder of why you need squad depth, particularly when you've got young players in those positions. Obviously, Lawrence is a bit of an anomaly because he's been injured, and just looking at some numbers, going to write about him this week as well, Derek. He did hit the ground running so quickly and so impressively, and I think he's been a bigger miss than maybe. But I say that actually the reaction was, I think, quite when he was initially injured. I think the reaction probably spoke to how much of an influence he'd become in that team already. But just those positions in behind the striker, again, when you've not got much of a goal threat from either side. I know Arfield's a bit different, but he's not the nailed-on starter out there. And as I say, he's not getting younger. He got injured last season when he played a lot of games in a row. I just think you need goals in those number 8 positions. And the contrast in the Ross County performance, for example, to the Dundee United game, Rangers need to model that Ross County performance against the majority of teams in the league to score more, to not leave themselves in positions where you're defending Dundee United corner at home late on, and you're thinking, oh, this is not a good situation to be in. And the first game away after the break is Tynecastle, so it doesn't come easy, but maybe that's a game that will suit Rangers a little bit better as well, if it's a bit more transitional, a bit more space. But they need, I think they need as well, a few players to just come and hit, like Colak has hit their top level, start to kind of carry the team a wee bit when they need it. Players like Kent, hopefully Tillman will come back into that position, and Lawrence, because if you do have Tillman, Lawrence there, Kent, Colak, again, it's only really that right wing position that you're not really sure who plays there. There is strength and depth over other areas of the pitch, and if and when certain players come back from injury.
Yeah. Ian McPhee gets in touch. What's the position on Roofhand Hollander? Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's comments on Kemar Roof were, I'm going to say, slightly disappointing, Joshua, for those that are looking to see him back in the team pretty soon. Don't think he has any idea when he's going to be back. And ditto Hollander, I think it's going to be some time. Who knows if we'll see him in the Rangers jersey again. But those two players, who knows, I think, is the answer to that one, which they're two first-team players. We all know that they're quality when they're fit and firing. However, unfortunately, they're injury-prone, and Rangers simply can't rely on them.
Yeah, I mean, he's reluctant to put a time frame on Hollander, I think, evidently, because he's been asked about that a lot. And every time he's kind of, not put a time frame on it, which obviously it's not his fault, but I guess that's maybe what you do to protect a player when they've had such an injury record like Hollander. But you look at it now, and how many minutes has he played since he scored the Old Firm winner? A handful, and it's hard to see how he really plays a significant role for Rangers again, because his injuries have been so bad. And Ruth, it was an interesting one. I mean, I don't know. The thing is, obviously, these type of comments can get lost in translation. But he effectively said it could be, correct me if I'm wrong there, but he effectively said it could be a short amount of time or a long amount of time. And I think that's maybe alluding to the fact that Ruth has just had so many injuries. So presumably he's a very difficult player to, it's difficult to know when he'll be back or put a time frame on it. Was that what you took from it? I'm going to find the actual quotes.
I put it that he doesn't know. Like you, it's been a long time since we've seen him in a Rangers jersey. I've sort of discounted both of them at the prospect of seeing them anytime soon, which is disappointing, of course, but you need to be realistic with regards to that. They've been out for such a long time. They're not going to come straight back in and hit the ground running. And even if they do, who's to say they're not going to pick up even more knocks and niggles and things like that? So, listen, it is what it is. They're two of a number of players that are on the treatment table at the moment. Yanis Hadji is another one. A lot of comments coming in with regards to him. We're not expecting him back until after the World Cup. And then he has to get up to speed also. Ryan Jackson, another one who's been had his injury issues of late. He has been playing and, of course, was called up to the Scotland squad as well. So fingers crossed that he can stay clear of injuries. But yeah, the Rangers have not had a good time with regards to knocks and long-term injuries and things like that to key players. It has to be said as well. So it's one to keep an eye on, but I'm not expecting them back anytime soon. This is an interesting one from Stephen Kirkland, and I'm not quite sure the answer to this, Stephen. He says, morning chaps, want to talk about an overlooked subject. Do you think the passing of Jimmy Bell has affected the dressing room and their early season form? That's a tough one to answer, Stephen. I think there's no doubt about it. He was part of the furniture at Ibrox. You heard after his sad passing, just how much he meant to each and every player that walked through the gates at Ibrox as well. Even the manager, Giovanni van Bronckhorst, held him in high regard. We've seen how much he meant when that semi-final win over Leipzig as well, when the players were dedicating it to Jimmy Bell. Quite an emotional night, not only for the fact that Rangers, of course, progressed to that final, but it was just after the sad passing of Jimmy. But yeah, he's a big character in the dressing room, and I'm sure he'd have been making it. He'd be telling the new signings that were coming in the door, just the standards and the expectation levels that need to be met. So listen, he's a massive loss. There's no doubt about it. Question here as well coming in from RFC56. Question: what's happening with Morelos and Kent's contracts? Is what it is. No contracts, no nearing. From what we've been told, I don't think that they're any closer to signing new deals as it currently stands. What's your feeling with regards to that, Joshua? I mean, they'll be free to sign pre-contracts in January, but I think on current form, it's a question whether. I mean, they are assets, there's no doubt about it, but in current form, are they deserving of new contracts, the pair of them? I don't think Morelos has had an opportunity. Kent, of course, out of form just now.
Yeah, well, obviously you want to, if they are to move on, you want to get money for them. That's, I guess, the case. Every football club would be like that. We've not, I mean, the last kind of update you heard from the manager was, I'm trying to think. I think it was the open training day when he said that, speaking to Sky, and I think he was speaking very positively about a Morelos contract. That was obviously before everything kind of kicked off and seems to have settled down and be a bit better now. So I guess that's something that will materialise over the next couple of months. But it's such a, the gap that Rangers have now between now and the World Cup when you're looking at the number of players that are out of contract next year, aside from Morelos and Kent, you look Jack, Davis, McGregor, off the top of my head, Hollander, can't think of any more, but a number of players are off the top, are out of contract. Someone was sending me the list of players that are in contract next season, and there's not that. There's enough, but there's going to have to be a number of signings.
It's going to have to be a bit of a rebuild, starting in January and definitely in the summer.
Yes, you have to, I guess, turn over a squad at some point, and either you do it gradually with the first team and maybe you bring in a couple of starters every year. But as we've seen, kind of the Napoli game is probably a good example of the fact that hasn't really happened at Rangers. Obviously, that's you've not got, for example, Colak and there are Lawrence players who will come in to be part of the first team picture. So it's going to be a big couple of months as ever before the World Cup. There is also players like Leon King, and it's probably worth touching on. I don't know if we've spoken about him in this international break. I thought he did really well against Dundee United, and he's a good example of someone who only 18 now looks very much part of the first team picture. Quicker than I thought he was actually with his recovery pace. I was just looking at some of his defensive numbers this morning, and as I say, I think he was impressive against Dundee United. You have Charlie McCann, who I don't think is an attacking midfielder, but you can see what quality he has on the ball. As I said earlier in the week, I thought he was the best performing central midfielder against Dundee United. I just don't think it's his natural game to be the goal scorer in the team necessarily. So there is, I guess, young players coming through. You'd expect Lowry to be a big part of that first team picture as well, particularly next season after he comes back from injury. But yeah, I agree with you there. It's going to be it's going to be a big summer in terms of the future of the squad. Maybe what we thought would happen this summer is going to happen next summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll just finish up with this comment that's popped in from Barry Nickel. Speaking of signings, do we believe John Bennett when he told us about the new signings approval process? Gio Ross, Wilson, he means, and the board collectively agree. From our understanding, what happens is Ross Wilson, the recruitment staff identify players. And I mean, Giovanni van Bronckhorst, we're led to believe, has a final say on players that come into the club. But there's the jury is certainly out on not only the summer acquisitions, but the transfer windows prior to that. A lot of supporters feeling that the business could have been done a little bit better, especially this window. I think Antonio Colak has been a quantified success, there's no doubt about it. Tom Lawrence, prior to his injury, it looked good. But the other ones, Joshua, and John Bennett did say he's not one for judging players too early. But at the same time, Rangers, the supporters need to see more contribution from some of the players that have been brought in. And he did touch on that player trading model. There is some concern that as to where the next Calvin Bassey and Nathan Patterson is going to come from.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice if you had the constant flow of them, wasn't it? But I mean, I guess all clubs, you'd imagine, work on a similar level of. You say that, but you look at Ten Hag, Man United this year, and you think he's just went and plucked 4 players who he used to play with or used to manage in the
Ajax are the masters at the player trading model.
They are, yeah. So I presume in terms of players transfers coming in, that's quite commonplace, where a manager has a lot of influence maybe on the style of player, because you certainly look at, for example, the squad Gerrard built and the players he brought in, they're very tailored, a Roof or a Hadji, very tailored to playing that kind of narrow 4-3-3 system. The time, of course, completely agree, the time for these players to hit the ground running is soon, because obviously points matter now as much now as they do later in the season. Yeah. Players can have turnarounds again. The Bassey example of St Mirren in the Cup, none of these players have had a start as bad as that or made huge mistakes, but perhaps just haven't hit the ground running like they need to. And someone like Matondo, a winger coming in when Rangers are in need of a winger, you'd like to see him play a little bit more. But as I say, after the international break, presumably the team will have some good time in the training pitch, and then Hearts away, which we'll be building up to, I'm sure, a lot next week. That's going to be such a big game, and then Liverpool away after that. So they don't come easy after the international break, there, do they?
2 wins out of 2, I would happily take coming back off that international break. Listen, that'll do us there, folks. Thanks to everyone for getting in touch with the programme. As ever, it's very much appreciated. Just a reminder, just £1 for 2 months' worth of content. If you want to check out some of the great work that we're doing over on the site, just head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe for all the details. We'll be back again tomorrow. But until then, enjoy the rest of